The regular resident waterfowl hunting season opens September 27th. Today we're visiting with Migratory Game Bird Management Supervisor John Palarski to go over all the details and what hunters can expect this fall. I'm Mike Anderson with the North Dakota Game and Fish Department.
Well, we were pretty dry going into the spring, and kind of to talk about some of the conditions that we have currently and certainly what we had when ducks and geese migrated through the state, it's important to go back a few months. And this past fall, we were pretty dry throughout much of the western third of the state and also the southern tier. We were kind of looking for quite a bit of snowfall to try and make up for some of those drought conditions. Unfortunately for waterfowl, we didn't end up getting those, and so going into spring of 2025, we were pretty dry. A lot of the ducks and geese, especially our early migrants like mallards and pintails that were moving through the state, didn't find a lot of water on the landscape, and a lot of the semi-permanent wetlands were mostly frozen, and so as a result, a lot of those early migrating species ended up pushing through North Dakota and going up into Canada, which again, unfortunately, they didn't find very improved conditions there either, and probably went north to the boreal forest to nest. So we time our May breeding survey to kind of coincide when most of the waterfowl settling patterns have already played out, and most of the ducks and geese that we have in the state are going to be attempting to nest in the state. This year was our earliest survey on record. We started it on May 6th. Duck numbers were down as well as wetlands. Those two kind of coincide with each other, at least in the state. Breeding conditions definitely impact how many ducks settle here in North Dakota, but we've definitely been seeing a declining trend in our mid-continent duck population, which also plays a role in some of the numbers that we saw. Well, as we move throughout the spring, at the end of May, we ended up getting quite a bit of rain throughout much of the state, especially some really important breeding areas of North Dakota, particularly throughout the Missouri Coteau. Conditions actually were moved up probably to fair to good range, depending on where you were. Our wetland conditions were still down from last year, but last year we had pretty exceptionally wet conditions going into the beginning part of summer and into the peak of the nesting season, but they were still down from last year. We did have 4 to 7 inches throughout much of the breeding range in North Dakota. Some of those isolated areas were seeing a lot of rain. I'd say in the south central part of the state we had pretty good brood conditions, but just because we had water on the state doesn't necessarily we have excellent brood production. A lot of that is dictated by how many ducks settle in the state, and from our May survey, things were down. So our duck index was down 8.7% from last year, and that's down 34% from our 1994 to 2016 average, when conditions were very good for producing ducks in the state and we had high abundance. Just a few highlights for some of the species. Mallards were down 26% from last year and are currently at their lowest level since 1993 on our May survey. Green-winged teal and pintails showed similar declines as well from last year. The one bright spot, though, is we have seen an increase in many of our diver species, including canvasback, scaup, and redheads. We actually recorded our highest redhead index, up 23% from last year, but our highest index from the survey's history. So our brood surveys that we're conducting in July, obviously we're trying to capture or at least get an index of reproduction in the state. And actually we were up 28% from last year from our brood surveys, but down considerably from the 1994 to 2016 average, which is kind of the heyday of ducks in North Dakota when we had good wetland and also good grass conditions that ducks need to nest in. So as a result, we kind of calculate a fall flight index, which is a combination of our May breeding survey estimate and also our July duck brood estimate. And we're expecting a fall flight that's similar to last year and also similar to 2021. Our duck numbers have been declining in recent years, and obviously there's been a lot of changes to the landscape. We're down about 2 million acres of CRP from the height in the early part of the 2000s, and obviously for our upland nesting waterfowl species like mallards and pintails and gadwall, that has some pretty dire consequences for them as well. We're also experiencing some pretty unprecedented wetland loss too in terms of drainage and consolidation. Again, between the grass and the wetlands, that's going to dictate our ability in North Dakota to be able to produce ducks for the mid-continent population, and those declines go hand in hand, and unfortunately we're seeing a pretty precipitous decline in habitat. And again, that's going to dictate how many ducks we're able to produce in the state and the opportunities that our hunters are able to have. Conditions throughout Prairie Canada have been dry over the last couple of years, and kind of that similar trend again this year. A lot of ducks that were pushing through North Dakota and into Prairie Canada ended up probably settling in the boreal forest. As far as our Arctic nesting geese, we're expecting pretty good production. Some of the early reports that were coming out for specklebellies and light geese and also some of the Arctic nesting Canada geese as well were pretty good. We're expecting pretty much average to above average production, which should bode well for hunters throughout the state. Our Canada geese were down 15% from last year and have been declining over the last 3 years, but still generally pretty robust and provide good opportunities for sportsmen in the state. As far as regulation changes, one of the bigger ones is the requirement of a state electronic waterfowl stamp. That's new this upcoming year. That's going to help us track the amount of resident and non-resident waterfowl hunters that we have in the state. We also had some zone changes as well, and also our pintail bag limit went up to 3 for this year. We want to make sure that folks are HIP registered in North Dakota. For more information on our rules and regulations for this year, I'd encourage our hunters to go onto our North Dakota Game and Fish website to look those up. Fire concerns are fairly low at this time, but we still encourage hunters to be mindful when they're driving down section lines and going and parking vehicles so as to not inadvertently start fires. Obviously, conditions can change very quickly as we go throughout the fall, and so I just ask that hunters are cognizant of some of those changes to weather patterns and adjust accordingly. We encourage folks to leave gates as they find them. Obviously, be mindful of livestock and private property if they are on private property, especially plots land as well. And certainly watch out for landowners and equipment. Obviously, our hunting seasons coincide with a lot of agricultural harvests throughout the year. So we just ask that our hunters be mindful of making sure that they pull off roads and park appropriately so as to not get in the way of harvest. So aquatic nuisance species are also a big concern. We have a lot of our waterfowl hunters pursuing ducks and geese over water using small craft to do so, and we just ask that obviously folks use proper flotation devices when they're out in their boats, be cognizant of some of the cold temperatures and the elevated risk of hypothermia, but also taking care to minimize the risk of spreading aquatic nuisance species, pulling out plugs at the end, cleaning off aquatic vegetation off of decoys, gear, things such as that. Overall, our waterfowl hunters can expect a similar year to last year. Obviously, we've been having a declining mid-continent duck population, and some of our goose populations have been declining as well. But conditions and things are lining up to be pretty similar to last year, and plenty of opportunity for folks.